I'd like to now introduce the panel part of our presentation today. The panel is going to be focusing on issues relating to artists' livelihoods, the digital economy, and in communication and culture from Ryerson and York University. Simon's research interests include policy ecology, media theory, and the history of the persuasion industries. He's also an adjunct professor in the Department of Politics at the University of Regina. So welcome, Simon, and thank you so much for being our moderator and speaking today. I know basic income is something that you've taken quite an interest in. So
yes, thank you so much, Mary, for that lovely introduction. As Mary mentioned, this panel discussion will be on the topic of artists' livelihoods, and perhaps more pointedly, after William's presentation, how do we ensure artists have a livelihood, in our current era? I think that we can all agree that the majority of artists have always operated under a degree of economic precarity, but the technological changes of the last decade and the pandemic experience of the last year has really challenged the ability of artists to earn a livelihood from their creations. So one of the possible solutions to this problem, as William outlined, is a basic income, a guaranteed basic income. And advocates of a basic income argue that it will foster greater creativity, risk-taking, and innovation by allowing people greater choice to pursue more education, to develop new businesses, or to focus on artistic endeavors. So basic income could be one way of addressing the problem of artists being fairly compensated for the work they do, given the highly unstable and unreliable nature of royalties in the internet age for musicians, photography, graphic design, you name it. So some see a basic income as an indirect way of funding the arts, allowing artists the economic security they need to pursue their interests and take chances without fear of, where is that next rent check going to come from? So our discussion of artists' livelihoods today will include myself, Patty Lamb, and Julie Zarowich. So I will introduce my other panelists right away. Patty Lamb considers himself a Canadian, Irish, Ulster Scots, Quaker, Huguenot, Celtic, Proto-Indo-European citizen of the world. Born in Armagh, Northern Ireland, he studied modern history at Trinity College, Dublin, and has a postgraduate degree from the University of Alberta. He has maintained a studio practice as a visual artist for 20 years. His work is strongly influenced by history, memory, and social culture, offering a personal narrative concerning human migration and attachment to the land. Patty is the recipient of several scholarships and awards. In 2009 and 2011, he received a fellowship and residency at the Ballingglyn Arts Foundation in Ballycastle, County Mayo. He has also been awarded residencies at the Thomas Gushel Studio in Blairmore, Alberta, the Ortona Armory in Edmonton, and Two Rooms Contemporary Arts Projects in Newfoundland. And currently, Patty is the president and national spokesperson for CARFAC and co-chair of Copyright Visual Arts. And our second panelist, Julie Zarowich, is the first member of parliament for the riding of Davenport, not too far away from my old stomping grounds in Toronto. Elected in 2015 and re-elected in 2019, Julie was recently appointed to the influential Standing Committee on Finance. She also serves as chair of the National Immigration and Refugee Caucus, vice chair of the Canadian section of Parl-Americas, chair of the Canada-Turkey Parliamentary Friendship Group, co-chair of the Canada-Mexico Parliamentary Friendship Group, and vice chair of the NATO Parliamentary Association. In February of 2021, Julie introduced a private members bill in the House of Commons that would enable a national strategy for a guaranteed basic income in Canada. This is the first time a bill has been introduced in the House of Commons on guaranteed basic income. The objective of Bill C-273 is to provide an enabling framework for implementation pilots of basic income to be created between provinces, territories, Indigenous governments, and the federal government. So that is our panel. I will give a very quick overview of basic income, what I'm calling basic income, in 10 minutes, and then I will hand it over to Patty, and then he will hand it over to Julie, and then we will have some time for Q&A after that. So without further ado, I will launch into my presentation on basic income. And I just am going to need to share my screen. So let me see if I can do that. Please do let me know if you can see it. Okay.
We can see it.
You can see it? Can I get it in slideshow though? The question. Let me just stop share. Of course. Apologies. Let me just go back there. Okay. Is that full screen now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. So many of you have heard about this idea of basic income, sometimes called a universal income or a guaranteed income. It's become increasingly popular. We've heard it mentioned many times today. So let's begin by defining what do we mean by a basic income. So a basic income is an unconditional cash transfer from the government to citizens. There's no work requirement. Everyone gets a basic income via a government transfer. You don't have to be employed. It sets up a basic income floor that no one can fall beneath. And there are two main models to achieve this. The first is what's called a negative income tax model, and that's where the benefit is clawed back as earnings increase. And the second is called the universal demo grant model, and that means the benefit remains the same regardless of employment earnings. Now, most basic income pilot projects in North America have been the negative income tax model. And you certainly may have heard of the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project that was discontinued under the Ford government. That was a negative income tax model. Something like old age security, that's an example of an existing universal demo grant model. All persons age 65 who meet certain residency requirements get the same amount of money regardless of their income. So perhaps the most interesting aspect of the basic income debate is how people of very different ideological perspectives support the idea, from social democrats to liberals to conservatives. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that while they all support a basic income in principle, what they imagine a basic income to be and what they imagine it will do can vary widely. So the devil really is in the details. Different people support different models of basic income for very different reasons. And sometimes what different people think a basic income should achieve can be at odds with each other. So as you can see here, these are some of the many reasons why people advocate for a basic income. And I certainly won't go through all of them. We don't have the time, but I just want to highlight some of these rationales for a basic income can sometimes be in conflict. So for example, we often hear that a basic income will empower workers, right? Because with a basic income, I don't have to accept the first job that comes along in order to survive. Indeed, with a basic income, I don't have to enter the labor market at all, right? I can go pursue more schooling. I can pursue artistic endeavors without fear of how I'm going to pay my rent. But we also hear basic income supporters, particularly those in the tech community, argue that a basic income will make the kind of part-time, low-paid work in the sharing economy look more attractive, that it can somehow operate as kind of a subsidy for low-wage work. Or we hear that a basic income will render our social safety net more humane and less punitive, removing the stigma of receiving income support. Yet conservative advocates for a basic income often see it as a way to replace the social safety net with a monthly cash payment, providing the justification for the privatization and marketization of public services like healthcare, public pensions, and the like. So for instance, here's a quote from influential American conservative intellectual Charles Murray, famous for the bell curve, talking about how a basic income could replace the entirety of the American social safety net. So as you can see, a basic income can mean different things to different people, and some of these can seem contradictory. Right? One side sees it as empowering workers to no longer have to accept low-pay work, whereas others see it as a way to subsidize that kind of work. It can't do both. So the question is, what kind of BI are people advocating for? Some versions of basic income may achieve some of these goals, whereas others may achieve others. So when someone says, I support a basic income, the next question you need to ask is, well, what kind of basic income? Of course, how much money you actually receive under a basic income will greatly impact what kind of effects it will have. So there are basic income models that start as low as $2,000 a year to as high as $24,000 a year. Once again, the model of BI that might be adopted is really important to what kind of societal goals it can actually achieve. So let's look at the Ontario basic income model, which was discontinued, mainly because it's the model that's been most costed and examined. And once again, we don't need to get into all the details. I guess most important is what people receive and the fact that it is a negative income tax model, which means that it will claw back the amount decreases as you earn more. And this will give you a sense of what the Ontario basic income gives an individual in relation to other income support. So as you can see, it's much more generous than social assistance, but it still falls below the low income cutoff, which is the unofficial poverty line in Canada. So I guess the question is, you should ask yourself is, could you live on this amount without seeking out extra income? Or would you want to live on this amount without seeking out extra income? And does this level of income empower people, or does it make low wage employment perhaps more attractive? So let's address some of the main objections to basic income. The two most common arguments against a BI are that, one, we can't afford it, and two, it will be a disincentive to work. So let's look at the cost objection first. So to give you a sense of what a basic income would cost, in 2017, the Parliamentary Budget Office calculated that to universalize the Ontario pilot to the entire country would cost about $75 billion. The federal government at the time spent about $32 billion on low-income supports, not including OAS, GIS, and the child tax benefit. So a universal basic income based on the Ontario model would require an additional $43 billion in extra spending. And obviously a universal demogrant model would cost even more. So it's certainly doable, but either way, it's definitely going to require significant tax increases to support such a program. And after 30 years of reducing corporate and personal income tax rates, is that something that Canadians have an appetite for? And that's a question to which I will return. So let's consider the other objection. Free money is going to make everyone lazy and unwilling to work. Well, we do have some hard evidence on what the effects of a basic income are, mainly because of a small experiment done in Manitoba in the 1970s. So according to the Manitoba experiment, it doesn't look like basic income creates a mass disincentive to work. In fact, it appears to do those things that I mentioned at the outset. It empowers people to enter or not enter the labor force based on their circumstances. In this case, a basic income allowed mothers to care for their children and teenagers to stay in school, choices they might not have been able to make without the basic income. In fact, the basic income actually increased the high school graduation rate among recipients, an unanticipated but positive outcome. So as far as this objection goes, the evidence doesn't appear to show a disincentive to work. As we've seen, these basic incomes are rarely above the poverty line, so most people are going to want to supplement that income. And some people will choose not to work or work less than they otherwise would, but that's what a basic income is supposed to do. It's supposed to give people a modicum of economic security so they can have the freedom to make choices about work, family, school, etc., that they might not otherwise have. I think the cost objection has more merit. Is it unaffordable? No, but as I showed, a program of this scope and size is going to require an increase in taxes, no doubt about that. And that leads me into what I would call the political problem of a basic income. As I mentioned at the outset, there are a lot of different people who want basic income to do very different things, some of which can seem at cross purposes. And that political question for me is, given the political landscape, how realistic is it that we could get a basic income implemented? And if we could, how certain is it that the kind of basic income we get delivers the kind of positive outcomes that so many people expect? So as I said, no doubt that a program of this size and scope is going to require us to raise taxes. But here's the problem. For the past 30 years or so, the trend among governments of all stripes, both provincial and federal, has been to reduce taxes, not to increase them, right? So here's the historical trajectory of the corporate tax rate in Canada. As you can see at the height in the early 1980s, hovered around 50%. It's about half that now, right? here's the tax rates for the wealthiest Canadians, high income earners, right? Once again, almost half, from a high of 60 to 30%. So does the Canadian public have an appetite for raising taxes in order to pay for a program like basic income? Do Canadian corporations? Let's also remind ourselves that business lobby groups like the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, regional chambers of commerce, they've already been lobbying very hard for the reduction of CERB benefits because they can't entice workers to return to work with the wages they're currently paying. What will their reaction be to a basic income that empowered workers to be more selective in their employment? And that's not to say that I don't think these attitudes will change in the future. I think we are already seeing conventional wisdom around taxes and deficits start to change with the experience of the pandemic. But without very strong public pressure to enact the kinds of taxation required to get the sort of progressive version of basic income, I'm afraid the greater likelihood is getting the more impoverished conservative version, where the granting of a sort of limited basic income is then used to justify the rollback of other state subsidized public services like healthcare, childcare, things like that. And I fear the argument will be, look, we give you $16,000 a year. Now you go out into the market and you purchase private healthcare, you purchase market rate tuition, you purchase private pharmacare, you purchase private childcare. Now, I'd certainly love to be proven wrong, and I'm going to hand it over to our other speakers now, and perhaps they will do that. So I will now hand it over to Patty. Patty, it's all yours. I should stop sharing this. There you
go. Thank you, Simon, and thank you everybody for being here. I just want to mention that I'm speaking to you today from Amiskwiti, Beaver Hills, on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional gathering ground of many Indigenous people, and I'm very proud to be a guest on this land. I'd also like to thank William, whose book I thoroughly enjoyed. It was reinforced some of the some major ideas that I already believe in and problems that exist, and gave me a lot of time to think about others too. So I've been asked to sort of present you one particular project that CARFAC has been working on. But before I do that, I would just like to emphasize that it's not the only thing that we've been doing in what has been a pretty exceptional 18 months. So it's very clear to us as an organization that represents artists from coast to coast to coast that some people were, in fact, because of the government relief programs such as CERB, artists were in fact in a better position, in a more stable position than they have been for some considerable time, which makes it, I think, even more obvious that the current social network doesn't recognize artists as workers in an industry, which I believe they are. And that's why we've been an active member of Basic Income for the Arts, which is one of a number of groups from different sectors across the economy that have been lobbying for a basic income, or certainly investigation of a basic income of sorts. But I think there's also other areas where I feel I have to point out that the government and successive governments have let us down, really, in terms of legislation. The artist resale right, which is recognized in 90 countries worldwide, but not in Canada and not in the United States. Why that is, I'm not quite sure. So that has a particularly profound impact on two sectors, on all artists, but on two sectors: northern artists, who already lack the opportunities to exhibit and market that we're lucky enough to have in other parts of Canada, their work immediately increases in value as soon as it hits the secondary market, and yet they see nothing of it. Also, senior artists who have worked and whose work has progressed and who have solidified an reputation in the sector. Again, many of them live below the poverty line at a later stage in their career and they receive no remuneration for the appreciation of their work. So if you consider that as part of the Copyright Act, it's now 4 years beyond its mandate for a review, and there are other things about the Copyright Act that we would be lobbying for too. We're also lucky enough in this country to have a federal status of the artist legislation, which I think could be, along with copyright, be considered a living document and could much better serve artists if it was revisited. So I just think there are, just wanted to point out that I think there are things that won't make artists rich, but could make a substantial difference to changing the perception of artists' place in society and in the workplace in a positive way. So to follow that, I am going to show you one of the projects briefly that I think relates strongly to what William's book and address was about. So this is what the logo and the branding for the Imprimo project that we're working on, which I hope you're going to see much more frequently in the months and years ahead as we roll it out. Some background to that. I think the success of this program has a large part to do with the fact that in Canada we have some very strong national organizations that advocate on behalf of artists' socioeconomic conditions and also protect their copyright. So we all know we have CARFAC, our sister group in Quebec, RAV. Both of those organizations jointly own and operate Copyright Visual Arts, which licenses work on behalf of artists and pays them for the reproduction or exhibition of their work. Access Copyright, which protects works by authors, but also represents visual artists. Their innovation lab, which is called Prescient. And of course, we're very grateful for the support of the Canadian Council for the Arts and their funding for the sector, and that they are integral to this particular project. So we sat down a couple of years ago as a group, all those organizations, in response to what I would consider fairly disastrous amendments to the Copyright Act in 2012, which decreased the amount that artists are getting paid for the use of their work. And we thought, what if creators controlled how their work was used? And what if users could easily discover trusted information about the work? So with those two sort of key goals or questions in mind, we started to look at what ingredients or what stepping stones we needed to work on to enable that vision. And you can see them step by step here, knowing that the creator is indeed who they are claiming to be. The origin of the work can be known in a verified manner. The information about the work is provided by authorized parties, and it has the weight of CARFAC, RAV, Copyright Visual Arts, and Access Copyright behind it, as well as institutions, galleries and museums. The link between creators and the works are established reliably. And information on provenance, rights, and ownership is known for the work. So that's something that the artist can be involved in, as can galleries and other institutions. And then how that work can be part of, can be used within the sort of the arts economy. And what we came up with over a period of time is Imprimo, artwork simplified. So it is evolved as we've developed it, but what it allows artists to do is manage your artwork with perhaps less time and effort, or a unified platform to allow you to do that in a simplified manner, and how that can be used within the sort of the arts economy. So what are the key features? It will create, the artist can create a verified record of your artwork. You can log its provenance or its history. You can build trust and reduce friction with high quality certificates of creation. In practical terms, creating a QR code, which then links for each individual work, which then links back to your profile that you create on Imprimo or to your website. And what we're providing is a modern, professional, manageable web presence for your artwork portfolio. It allows you to tell the story through videos, photos, and inspirations. It encourages best practices by allowing artists and encouraging artists to become more professional about how their work is presented, the history, where it's exhibited, and their track record. And of course, we're hoping that it will be displaying your artwork in the best possible digital tools. So I talked earlier a little bit about the ecosystem for Imprimo. This is not an exhaustive list, but in general terms, the arts economy includes, for visual arts, certainly artists. By image banks, I mean existing museum collections, or for instance, Copyright Visual Arts, which is a licensing agency, has an existing image bank for its members. Galleries and museums have collections, collectors and curators, students and researchers, and of course, buyers. But our mandate obviously is first and foremost for artists. And if this doesn't work for artists, then in our minds, it doesn't work at all. So that's our goal with this platform, this initiative, is to include artists first and foremost. But we've also extensively interviewed galleries and museums, as well as artists, to find out what they want and what the pitfalls might be, and what and how we can make it as user-friendly for them as possible. And we will expand to include other groups as our funding and our time permits. And we think this is a way in which we can empower artists to within a new evolving marketplace. So I'll end it there by just saying that, importantly, that you can, we will be launching this with a webinar in June, and you'll be hearing more from us through CARFAC and other organizations as we roll it out. but you can sign up to be notified as soon as it launches through the website that's listed there. I've also included my own email, and I'm be very glad to answer any questions or follow up with that, both now and at a later date if you whenever you have a question about it. So I'm gonna stop at that point, and I'm gonna hand it over to Julie.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks so much, Patty. I'm actually going to start off with a land recognition. So I'm in downtown West Toronto. I want to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I just want to say huge thanks to Marnie Gladwell for inviting me, and to all the organizers, Saskatchewan Arts Alliance, CARFAC, and OnCue Performance Hub. I also want to say that it's a real honor for me to be sharing the Zoom platform stage with William Darowitz, not only because he has as difficult a last name as mine to actually pronounce, but also I very much have really appreciated hearing about his thoughts, and very much appreciate his book, Death of an Artist. Simon, I really appreciated the introduction. I do want to correct something. I was not the first MP for Davenport. The first MP was probably in the early 1910s. But I was the first female member of parliament in 2015.
Did I not say first female? I thought I did.
Yes, it's okay.
It's
okay, don't you worry. But I want to let people know it took till 2015 to get the first female member of parliament. I am downtown West Toronto, and my writing is I'm very proud that we have a lot of artists and creators and those working in the creative industry. And then this is for Patty's purposes. The part of my writing that I live in was actually opened up by the Irish. And so my house was actually built by the Mallon family. And so let's just say the roots of my personal community here, while I have the largest amount of Portuguese in the whole country, I will tell you that my particular part was started by the Irish. So I want to start with that. And then I think what I'll do is Jessie, who's on my team, she taught me how to sort of pick a presentation and share. So let me do that. Let me see if I can get this up. Okay, great. So let me get started with my presentation and try to sort of meet my 10-minute limit, which is, as everybody knows, very difficult for a politician to do. So in February of this year, I did first reading of a private member's bill which was called Bill C-273, and it's an act to establish a national strategy for a guaranteed basic income. I'm hoping that my second reading is going to be soon, in the second week of June. So that's coming up soon. It is absolutely the first time a bill has been introduced to the House of Commons on a guaranteed basic income. The bill is not about let's test how effective basic income is. I think there's been literally hundreds of pilots and examples around the world of how a guaranteed basic income is successful. But what I want to do is I want to test for the what's the best delivery model? What's the best? I want to test the implementation of a large scale basic income model. If passed, the bill would activate an enabling framework for provinces and or territories to actually to execute an implementation pilot for a guaranteed basic income program. So essentially what happens is the provinces and the territories would be able to sign an agreement with the national level and come up with an implementation pilot. I do not in my bill define the basic income program or what the program design is or what social programs would be included or what the cost would be. That is to be determined between the federal and provincial level. I do also want to just acknowledge, just because while I've introduced this bill for the first time, basic income sort of testing universal basic income has been talked about for many years, and there's been a lot of champions and unbelievable leaders across this country, and it's really on their shoulders that this bill sort of stands. So people like Ron Henkel, who I think was mentioned in terms of the Mencom study, people like Evelyn Forget, an academic researcher who's written books on this, people like Sheila Reguer, Floyd Marinescu, Hugh Siegel, Art Eggleton, many, many people who have been working on this for many more years than I have. And I also want to let you know that there are a number of provinces and territories that have expressed interest in some sort of implementing a large-scale basic income pilot. That's PEI, as well as Newfoundland and Yukon. In terms of key elements, the bill's very short, so I encourage you to read it on your own. I already talked, so the minister, essentially what happens is the Minister of Finance would develop a national strategy to assess the implementation models of a guaranteed basic income program in Canada. She would have to consult with a number of ministries and a number of stakeholders across Canada. I talked already about it would be an enabling framework for implementation pilots. It would also be creating some national standards, and it would also have a series of data collection points, which is absolutely super important. So why now? And why am I introducing it now? No matter how many times, so our government, the federal Liberal government was first elected in late 2015. We have made heroic attempts to actually reduce the income inequality gaps. There were a number of measures we put into place. We introduced the Canada Child Benefit. We've increased taxes on the top 1%, reducing taxes on the middle class. We've increased the guaranteed income supplement for seniors. We've increased the Canada Worker Benefit a number of times. And irrespective of all the things that we've done, our income inequality continues to grow. So we are making progress on reducing poverty levels, but our income inequality continues to grow. And so, in my opinion, I think we need to look at a new model that will form the basis of our social welfare system. Other reasons for why now: our current system is too complex, and no matter how many programs we put in place, no matter how many times we try to band-aid our system, still too many Canadians who are most in need are not able to access a number of our programs. I also indicate that the world of work is changing. There's more people in the gig economy. We have a lot more short-term contracts, and we know that jobs are being lost due to AI and automation. And when we're talking about loss of jobs, we're not just talking blue collar jobs, we're talking about white collar jobs, accounting, legal work. In addition, we have a lot of disruptors that's happening in the world today. So we're going through one right now, COVID, and climate change will continue to be a disruptor moving forward. I have a why now part two, lots more reasons. You know, a lot of people talk about, oh, after COVID, I want to go back to normal. I would argue that actually a lot of Canadians want to go back to a different type of normal. They want to move to a more sustainable way of living, and I think a different way of us actually supporting ourselves. And so I've put this last point is we need a system to better support Canadians in the 21st century, one that's more flexible, more agile, and is less complex. And I would argue that most of the systems that we have in Canada were created in the 1970s and no longer serve us, no longer serve the needs and our lives in the 21st century. And I know there was a point that I'm missing that I think is really important that I want to say, and I'm hoping that it'll come to me as I go along. Guaranteed basic income and stability. Actually, let me just go back to this. The other thing I would say to you, and the reason why I'm really, really supportive of these guaranteed basic income implementation pilots, is I'm a big believer in we're in a period of creative destruction. And I really believe that we need to be testing new models and new ways of doing things. And I believe that the federal government or governments in general are one of the few bodies that actually can fund this type of experimentation. And I figure if it's not going to be us, then who is it going to be? And if it's not going to be now, then when are we going to be doing this? Guaranteed basic income and stability. For me, a guaranteed basic income would provide the stability that is needed for Canadians to be able to train, to retrain, to upskill, to start new businesses, and to become their best selves. At its basic core, and I know Simon took you through some definitions, but to me at the very basic core, basic income provides a guaranteed regular payment that offers stability and support for the necessities of living. If you're someone that's constantly struggling to try to just figure out how you are going to survive, eat, or just even be able to put a roof over your head, you're not going to be able to become your best selves. You're not going to be thinking about upskilling. You're not going to be thinking about retraining. You're not going to be thinking about starting new businesses. You're just going to be too busy just trying desperately just to survive. So for me, guaranteed basic income is a model that provides stability. And for me, I know we talk a lot about guaranteed basic income and sort of helping those that are in poverty. I would say to you, not only do I believe that guaranteed basic income will help those in poverty, but those that are at risk of falling into poverty, and I think it'll also help our middle class as well. And again, the last point here is our current social welfare system is not well suited to help Canadians in transition. Very, very, this is a fundamental belief of mine. I believe that we have a very outdated system. It doesn't matter how many times we talk about trying to band-aid it or trying to fix it up. We need a new model. We need a new foundation to our social welfare system and a new way of supporting Canadians in the 21st century. I do want to talk to something that Simon had talked about, CERB, and how, you know, many employers are actually finding it hard to get people to go back to work because many of them are on sort of the newer version of CERB. The Canada Recovery Benefit is what it's called. I just want to remind everyone that the CERB was actually created with a very specific purpose in mind. It actually was created to keep people at home. Like initially, if you'll recall, we didn't really understand what COVID was. And so what we wanted to do is provide a generous monthly amount of money for people to stay at home and be able to afford their costs. That was the original intention. To me, any type of guaranteed basic income program has to be designed very well. The design of the program is very important. It's something that Ron Hickel from Manitoba talks quite a bit about. He's the one that designed the MIMCOM program, and I fundamentally believe him. We have to be very precise about our objectives and the program designs. We want to maximize stability and confidence and minimize costs and reduce the risks. So I'll go to the next point. In my opinion, any type of guaranteed basic income program, and the importance of it is, for me, it should be a cornerstone of Canada's innovation and growth strategy. You know, if we are going to maximize our economic potential in our future, I truly believe that we need to have guaranteed basic income as the foundation of our social welfare system. It will enable every Canadian to become their best self. If you're not worried about, you know, okay, I've lost my job, or my job has been eliminated. Okay, now what do I want to do? How is it that I want to sort of contribute next? What is it that I want to do next? If you don't have to worry about, you know, having nothing to help support you in terms of your basic living costs, then I think that you are freed to be able to innovate and to become your best selves, and to take risks. I also put here in your my third bullet point here that every Canadian should have an equal opportunity to succeed. I very much believe that this also helps resolve some of the systemic racism and the equity issues that we have. It provides sort of a floor for that everybody would have access to. And again, I'm a fundamental believer that everyone should have an equal opportunity to succeed. And then the last thing is that that there should be a principle of everyone should be better off as a result of a guaranteed basic income program. And the reason I put that in there is there's a lot of people out there that are worried about, well, if you put in your basic income program, what you're going to do is eliminate all the support programs that are out there. And I'm going to be worse off. And for me, that is not the objective. That is not the principle, in my opinion, of any type of a guaranteed basic income model or program. It should be that everyone is better off. Maybe the other thing I'd say about innovation and growth strategy is I also think that one of the ways for us to be evaluating success of any program is how well will it enhance our GDP growth? How much will it enhance our productivity? And I think those are two other very important factors to evaluate. So I think maybe I'll end with that. Other than maybe, I think Simon also talked to this about the politics. So how is it that you'll get any type of a government to be able to put this into place? I will say to you that change is difficult. It's always difficult, particularly when you're talking about creative destruction, and particularly when you're talking about, well, I just think we need a whole new system and you need to do a whole new way of looking at things. That's very difficult to do. And that's why my private members bill very much suggests you want to start having provinces test their whole province, their whole population with a mass implementation pilot, design it really well, make sure that it works properly before you're actually introducing it to the whole country. But in terms of the politics, I just pulled an article. I happened to pull it, so I'm glad that Simon mentioned it. It was pulled on May 10th. Election success for UK politicians backing universal basic income. So basically it talked about how lots of politicians who won their seats in the elections in the Welsh Parliament had signed a pledge calling for universal basic income, and they won their seats. So I think that if you talk to our youth of today, this is their lives. They're already living this, and so they already know that they need something like a guaranteed basic income model. And I think it's an idea that has been percolating for over 50 years, and I think it's a model and idea whose time has come. So thanks so much for the opportunity to participate today. I'm feeling a little bit guilty. I know how to share the screen, but I will see if I know how to unshare the screen. Ah, there we go. Okay, so I'm ready for any questions that people might have. Oh.
Thank you very much, Julie. I believe our first question is from Stephen Ross Smith, and I'm going to paraphrase here. Because he's got a great quote in here. Artists are like farmers, supplying the system upwards so everyone else can make money from their products. The system overwhelms us. I like our, perhaps far-fetched, idea of guaranteed income. Do you think we can ever get there? So that, in a way, that sort of addresses what you were just talking about, Julie, about the political realities. Yeah, I seem pessimistic, you seem optimistic. Patty, maybe you could be the tiebreaker.
Well, I would say that that the more I am involved with discussions on basic income, the more I see the potential for good things to happen rather than bad. So I'm not going to be a pessimist. I think it's something that's very much worth fighting for, and something that would make a huge difference in people's lives. I also think that it would, you know, it should not be underrated in the way that I'll speak from as an artist point of view. Everything I make is reinvested in the economy, in materials, in people that help me with my art, in, you know, in groceries or whatever thing, locally. So to me, it's a spur to having people become more positive and contributors to their local economy and to the national economy. So,
if I could also just add to that. So look, I gave a speech on our latest budget in the House of Commons a few weeks ago, and Elizabeth May stood up and she said, Julie, you're such a huge advocate for a guaranteed basic income, but it's not in federal budget 2021. And she goes, you know, well, what do you think about sort of basic income now? And I said to her, if anything, I've doubled down on my belief that we need it. I said to her, it is the responsibility of people like me and many other people. I will tell you, there's lots of my caucus members that very much are supportive. I'll also say that it was among the top policy decisions at our last Liberal convention. And I know that one of our cabinet ministers came out after that convention to say, this is an idea and a model that deserves serious study and consideration. So it is you know, these types of conversations are really helpful and very important. And again, it's part of my job to be convincing my colleagues, my team, all sides of the House, as well as our Prime Minister, that this is an idea that we need to be testing and implementing as soon as possible.
And I certainly would just add, like, as much as I am cynical about this, if you had told me 10 years ago that basic income would be, seriously considered by a federal government, I would have told you were absolutely nuts. So, I mean, the ground is changing very quickly under our feet, which, is exciting. And so I certainly hope that, we can grab this opportunity.
Can I just mention 2 more points, if that's okay? So my background, and this is my bad, not yours, Simon. My background is actually I have 20 years of business experience. I would have never expected myself to be the champion of a guaranteed basic income as well. But I fundamentally believe that the way we actually function and succeed in a digital and a knowledge economy moving forward is we really need people to be their best selves. And so for me, I think we need a different way of looking at things. And so this is why I'm supporting this model. The other thing that actually pushed me over the edge is there was a BC report that came out, and they actually have, like, I think it's on page 21. In BC alone, there's 192 support programs delivered by 20 departments and ministries with 35 entry points. The complexity of the programs that are out there is incredible. And still, we have a lot of people falling through the cracks, and still income inequality is growing. And still, we don't have a model that serves the needs of workers in the 21st century.
William, I wonder if you might have any comments.
What I've been thinking is that we're still working on universal health care.
Yeah.
And I think but the reason that I thought that is because a lot of the arguments for UBI that Julie was laying out are similar to arguments that people make for why it would be a good idea for people to have automatic health insurance so that they could become more flexible and they could take risks and so forth. I mean, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I agree that even if maybe we're farther away from UBI, although, like I said, it was prominent because of Andrew Yang. Certainly, the ground is shifting on public policy in a leftward direction much faster than anybody could have expected in the United States, and who knows how far we'll be able to get.
Well, William, just so you know, on April 19th, it was. I have an article from BNN Bloomberg. LA said to be the largest city to offer guaranteed income for the poor. Wow. So just to let you know, they have set aside $24 million in the budget to send $1,000 monthly payments to 2,000 low-income families in America. And what they're trying to do is test out the model. So anyways, it seems like it's catching fire in different cities. And, it warms my heart every time I see the different examples around the world.
And if Andrew Yang manages to become mayor of New York, which is possible, he's promised a program as well.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the questions, this is probably best for Patty, and it's sort of, a UBI might not be a silver bullet for everything. So this is from Patrick Close, and he asks, while UBI may establish a valuable basic level for all persons, including artists, it must be understood that the opportunities for artists to generate income beyond UBI will remain compromised by a current lack of workable and enforceable royalty structures and collective bargaining structures in all artistic disciplines across Canada. So much work is yet to be done. Would you agree with that, Patty?
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope that at the beginning of in my sort of portion of the panel discussion that I tried to point out exactly that, in that I'm not denigrating, nor am I, I think basic income is a fantastic idea and it's a very important idea, but there are other pieces of legislation, as I alluded to earlier, that not only will, I think, financially aid artists and enable them, but I think the corollary to that is that they add a really important level of respect to the profession across the country, and they give it really good backing. So we want to see copyright reform, and quite frankly, I have been to international conferences where the current Copyright Act and the 2012 amendments are known internationally as the Canadian flu. So the Fair Dealing, the Fair Practices Amendment, that, I'm sorry, if I'm not saying that right, but anyway, currently a lot of third level institutions are not paying to reproduce artists' work in a way that they were before. So royalties have gone down for authors particularly, but also for visual artists. That needs to be remedied. There's no, currently the only, the exhibition right only extends to artists from 1988, works created from 1988 and to the present. So many older artists and their estates do not benefit from work that's being exhibited. And of course, ARR, which would allow artists not only to make modest amount of income if their work is resold, but also to benefit if their work is shown in another country reciprocally. So they're all small, but they may seem smaller and inconsequential, and I think that's why there's a lack of momentum to remedy those things sometimes federally, but they're all very important, and they have to work in conjunction with a basic income guarantee and a number of other things, I think.
I agree with that, Patty, and I think your artist reseller rights, like, I know I've pushed a lot for that and I have been unsuccessful. I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm not speaking to present company.
Yes, I have been schooled on it, believe me. I'm really happy about the work we're doing on the Copyright and the Broadcast Act. I think those will be really positive. And then the other thing that I think people are, like, we don't talk enough about it, but once we start taxing the digital giants, those dollars are supposed to go back to the arts and culture industry. It's a way to actually support and fund the industry. Like, that is something that we've been missing for a while. So, you know, and this is, by the way, one of the other models I want to change is it takes us way too long to change things. Like the Copyright Act, it takes us 5 years to decide that it's outdated, and then another five years to actually start discussing, and then another 5 years to actually implement it. It's too long. In a world that's changing faster than ever before, it is way too long to be doing this. Anyways, just an aside.
And I would just add one further comment in that, you know, Canada recently entered into an agreement with the European Union, trade agreement, which didn't include ARR, even though that's a law in the European Union. Which is astounding to me, and we're about to negotiate with the United Kingdom on a trade agreement where ARR is also the sort of part of the rules. And I think, you know, I don't know why that got missed, but I think it's important to point that out, that we tend to sort of, it's ignored at this huge sort of higher economic level when in fact it's very important to people who are earning well under the poverty line or the national average. So.
Thank you, Patty. This question is for Julie. Thank you so much. This is from Mary. Thank you so much for putting this bill forward. Do you have a sense of where the obstacles to passing this bill are coming from and how artists could support or promote the bill? How can artists mobilize both to support the bill and to be involved in the testing of models that you are proposing?
That's a really great question. So thanks for that. I think writing to your local MPs is really important. So I'm really glad that, you know, I want to say we're in Saskatoon today. I'm not really there, but I'll say that I'm there in spirit. But, private members bills, what I'm starting to do is make calls to every single one of my 337 colleagues in the House of Commons to see whether or not they would be supporting this. And so write to your MP, that's really, really important. And then if you are in touch with any of your provincial leaders who might be interested in this type of implementing, doing an implementation model test of basic income, I think, pushing that also is important. And just us having this discussion is really, really important, talking to people about it. We have to get past, it's going to cost us too much. What is the cost of us not looking at a new model? What is the cost of us not better supporting our workers? What is the cost of not being, of not supporting Canadians to be more innovative and more productive? So we have to continue to talk about and share the information about and dispel the myths around costs, and that's going to stop people from working, because the evidence, and Simon shared some of it, and I have a lot more of it, has shown otherwise. But again, the design of the program is very, very, very important, which is why you want to test the implementation models. You want to get it right. You want to make sure that it is something that is producing the results that you're looking for. But everything that we have seen so far, I have full confidence. I have great confidence that it's a great model for us to be experimenting with on a large scale.
Thank you, Julie. Our next question is for Bill. So many of the challenges identified in Death of the Artist relate to the global dominance of the internet by tech corporations. Are we going to be able to tackle that? How? Imprimo is a good effort for the visual arts. I'm not sure how the other arts could do something similar.
Right. I actually think this is the central policy question. I didn't mention it because I think it's mostly something that has to happen in the United States, although the EU has also started to take this very seriously. Demonetized digital content is generating tens of billions of dollars a year for the tech giants. And the way to address that is to address the power of the tech giants, to break up the monopolies and to regulate the core platforms like utilities. I mean, I think those are the best suggestions that have been put forward. It's going to take a lot of effort because I mean, they're 50, these companies are, the big five are over 50% larger than they were at the beginning of last year already. Mm-hmm. But the climate around that has also changed radically in this country, and I imagine elsewhere, just in the last few years. A few years ago, those companies could do no wrong. They were idolized. Their CEOs were idolized. There's a lot of skepticism and a lot of resistance to them now because of privacy, because of political influence, because people are beginning to understand that we're all going to be their serfs if we don't start doing something about it.
So can I just add to that briefly?
Yes, please.
That I would agree that I've been to conferences where it's very evident that European collection agent or copyright management agencies and other organizations are way ahead in terms of being able to charge and bring the big players to regulate income from the artists in a small way, at least for that. And just the other part of that question, Imprimo is a good effort for the visual arts. I would like to point out that Access Copyright have a similar scheme for authors. So you can go to the Access Copyright page and look at the model that they've created, which is again an attempt to authenticate and empower authors in controlling their work. So.
Okay, I'm going to ask this next question mainly because I want you to all explain it to me. So one trending topic in the tech and art world are NFTs. I know a little bit about what an NFT is. Is Imprimo doing something similar? What are NFTs? How are they going to affect the livelihood of artists?
Non-fungible tokens. That's all I know.
That's
over to you.
The Emperor's New Clothes. Very emphatically, Imprimo is not doing that. Okay, what happens with NFTs down the road, I'm not entirely sure, but it's not in our focus at all. This is a model for artists and in their work and I say that very broadly. The type of the actual work that they create, not again, that's very hard to say, but not a token or a link to a website rather than a physical piece of work. Access copyright again with Prescient will be, I believe it's May 19th. Somebody can get in touch with myself or the Saskatchewan Arts Alliance. They're doing a webinar on Rouhani Levy, the CEO, is doing a webinar on NFTs, specifically because they have muddied the waters for everybody at a critical time, really, in building anything else, because people tend to think they're trying to associate it with what you're doing. So we're trying to we will be sort of creating more documentation and Q&As on what exactly they are.
I'm being told they're like digital Pokemon cards for art.
Yeah, that's.
Do we have any other questions, Marnie? Sorry, apologies if I've missed some. I'm having a hard time scrolling through this.
I think that there's several questions around the same areas that have already been addressed. So I think that you've pretty well covered it, unless I've missed something or somebody else has another question.
Well, so, I might have a question. I was wondering, finance to encourage the government to go ahead with something like a universal basic income program. I feel like we need to develop a conversation, a very essential conversation with the corporate world, who's lobbying for decreasing taxes and doing less and less and less for society, basically, and not feeling compelled to be part of it in some ways, beside making money off our backs. So is there any any strategy surrounding that? Because I feel like while we have a private bill going through the motions right now, I'm sure there are an equivalent effort back in the back room, possibly, that will convince people that no, this is not good.
Well, I'll start off, and I don't know if anybody else wants to. So first, thanks for the great question. So there's a group called UBI Works, and on the front of their website, they actually have 100 small and medium-sized businesses and some larger ones that actually support some sort of a guaranteed basic income, which I think is really great. I'll also say to you, again, because I come from Bay Street in Toronto, I will also say to you, I do know of some, I would say, business leaders, Canadian business leaders that are very open and supportive of at least considering sort of looking at new models to support workers or Canadians in the 21st century. I will say to you, they're not vocal or prepared to come out yet. But here's what I'd say to you, it took us a really long time to implement national childcare. And I think part of the reason we actually introduced in the budget is corporate Canada was actually saying, we need this to be able to be productive. And it's a way for us to get full participation or fuller participation, and a way to drive up growth and productivity in our country. But I think that, I don't know who asked that question. I think it's Anne.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you. One of the things that I'm trying to also do is trying to sort of get to corporate Canada and see whether there's anybody who's willing to come out. So we don't have another 50 years to figure this out. But I think you're right on the money in terms of us needing to also be bringing corporate Canada along. I don't know if I necessarily would say to you that there's anybody actually lobbying the government against this at the moment. A private member's bill is a private member's bill. I think if there was a minister who was doing sort of a broad study on it, that might bring corporate Canada out a little bit more vocally. One of my hopes is whether it's in the next platform for the Liberal Party in any upcoming election, which I'm hoping will be in 2023 and not anytime soon. But I'm hoping that it will be incorporating something around whether it's looking at it or testing it, basic income, and I'm hoping that'll bring people out into the forefront in terms of people, hopefully, who'll be supportive. I'd rather people come out and tell me that they don't like it, so that I can at least debate them. But it's the hidden stuff that's harder to get at, because you can't dispel the myths that way, and you don't know who you're up against when people are sort of behind a cloak and not really telling you that they disagree with it. So I say, come on out, tell us what you're fearful of and why you wouldn't be supporting this. So that's why it's really important for us to have these kinds of discussions in these types of forums.
And thank you very much, because I do believe that in the long run, they would end up with a more qualified workforce. Because people could make that decision of retraining and going back to school and so forth. And of course, for the art world in itself, we would be contributing to our identity and our culture as a nation. I mean, yeah, I think they have something to gain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the floor? Not seeing any currently in the chat.
I don't mind, Simon. We get so few hours of rest as politicians. I know you guys don't think that, but we do. So I've been working all day, so I'm okay. Don't fret. I don't feel offended. I think it's been a very good conversation.
Yeah, I would certainly echo that. Thank you so much, Julie, for your insights on this. Thank you so much, Patty. Thank you so much, Bill, for sticking around. And I believe I'm turning it over to Justine now, who will conclude the event for us. Justine?
Well, I just want to say hi, I'm Justine. I'm the president of CARFAC Saskatchewan. I want to give a special thank you to all of our speakers, William Durowitz, panelists, Julie Zurowitz, Simon Enoch, and Patty Lamb. And I want to thank everybody who attended, who made it to the event from all across the country. Thank you so much, and we hope you all have a great day.
Great.
Thank you, Justine.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting on this event.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Great conversation. Bye.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Did that go okay?
It went very well.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Thank you.
I'm always, anytime someone gives me a short time frame, I'm always like, oh God, I just feel like I speed too fast. So I hope I wasn't running 100 miles an hour.
That went very well, and I hope we can continue this conversation. I hope it's just beginning.
Yeah, no, I thought the discussion was really great, and I'm so glad that Bill came in on it too. So that was really, yeah, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I got to go parent a 4-year-old. Have a good afternoon, guys.
You too. Thanks.
Thanks, Marnie and Jessica, for doing such a good job and setting this up. And Wendy, thank you so much for coming on board. This was all really very exciting. I just thought it was, it's such an important discussion. And obviously from the comments that people had, it was well received. Now have to figure out where to go from here.
Well, there was some good input there at the last part too, so.
There was, yes, there was.
Yeah.
So, anyway, nice to see that CARFAC is doing good work with Imprimo, and hope that translates into other areas.
Yeah, I hope it translates too. They've been working on it for quite a while now, so.
Good. Well, thank you guys.
I just have a quick question. So we recorded it. Oh, maybe you want to stop recording it.
Sorry, what was that?
Stop recording?
Yes. Can you stop recording?
You did stop recording. Somebody stopped recording.